boy is back after a quick flight. After a quick journey up 2 flights of stairs is what I wanted to say. I am back in the attic, baby. Last night was Long Island Children's Museum's big event. What a really cool party that was. Shout out to the guys at Nerds That Care for taking me out to that event. Listen, when you host Philanthropy and Focus and you're the nonprofit sector connector, you get invited to the good parties, man. You get invited to a lot of the good parties. And it was really fun last night. And it's interesting. I knowing I was going to have this interview today, and I wore a purple shirt in honor of Lustgarten Foundation being here. Linda Tantawi is here with me today, CEO of the organization, and it is purple is the color of pancreatic cancer awareness, and many of the organizations that are in this space wear purple. And I wore a purple suit last night, Linda. I had a lavender suit on, and it actually I originally got the suit for the New York City Imagine Awards a couple years ago, and I wore that last night, and then I was like, oh my God, I got to wear purple again. But I wore that suit last night, so I'm not going to wear a suit on the show anyway because I'm in the attic. So I was like, I'm going to wear my purple Lindy Lou Foundation. So shout out to my family, my cousin Linda. In Linda's memory, we founded the Lindy Lou Foundation. And I have the purple bowling shirt on today. So I just had to do it, man. And I was texting with a colleague who I think we have in common, a guy called Dino Varelli from Project Purple this morning, Linda, right? I
Yep.
was texting with him and I was like, dude, listen, I said, Lyndon Tantawi's coming on my show this morning. So he just gave us a high five and a thumbs up and everything like that.
Great.
There's a guy who knows how to rock the purple for sure, right?
Absolutely. He's a great guy.
Great man for sure. A member of his dad really doing the great work. And as I think I mentioned to you the other day, I have a close family friend and actually a family member who experienced pancreatic cancer and had the Whipple surgery. I don't even think I told you that part. Yeah, maybe we'll get into that. But close family friend of ours who tragically passed at a young age. And there's a lot of fun on Philanthropy and Focus, but there's also a lot of seriousness. We got to cover serious topics here. And this is one of those times where an organization like yours was created out of a sickness, out of an illness that somebody had, which we'll go into today, and is doing incredible work. I mean, $282 million has been dedicated through the funds that are raised from your organization, has been dedicated to the research done for this disease that it sadly takes too many lives and many young people. So look, Linda, we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about your background as it related to Susan G. Komen. But when we talked earlier in the week, I said, listen, it's just you and me having a cup of coffee. I noticed you have your coffee. I got my coffee. Um, I, it's really just, I want to hear about your journey. What drew you to this work? Why was nonprofit important to you? Was it healthcare that was important to you? We're going to get into what a foundation is and how it's operating and the great work you're doing and the team is doing at Lustgarten Foundation. Shout out, by the way, to my friend Stephanie Garabedian. And I know how to pronounce that because I have a lot of Armenian friends. Shout out to my friend Stephanie Garabedian. We had a dinner together with the Nonprofit Resource Hub over the summer, probably in July, I think it was, with a bunch of folks who lead major nonprofits out here in Long Island. And that's how this all happens because it's all about relationships. So, Linda, if you would, for me, take us on your journey. Take us down the path of how you end up in this position where you are right now to do the great work you and the team are doing. But I want to hear where it started, please.
So there was once a time when we actually had to find jobs in the classifieds. And at the time, I was living with my parents outside of Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia papers were on strike. So I bought the New York Times and was glancing through the classifieds and found a posting for a junior account executive at a fundraising consulting firm. So I applied for the job. I didn't get the job at that time, but then the owner of the company, Jane Geaver, called me on Christmas Eve, and that must have been back in the, I don't know, 80s, and called me Christmas Eve and offered me a job. So I moved from Philadelphia to Hoboken, New Jersey, and went to work for J.C. Geaver as a junior account executive. And I had a number of really terrific accounts, including Eastside House Settlement, which is one of the oldest settlement houses in New York that provides services for people who are homeless, for the elderly, for kids, and they were a wonderful organization. I learned a lot about foundation and corporate fundraising. I also learned a lot about board management from Eastside House. But I had many clients, and that was one of the terrific things about that one job, is that I had so many clients at one time that I learned a lot about different sectors. I did capital campaigns for YMCA's in New Jersey. I did foundation and corporate work for a number of other organizations, including the Black Leadership Commission on AIDS. And I rose up through the ranks and I became a senior account executive. And then I was actually offered a position from my client, the Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, to be her director of development. So I left J.C. Geaver, went there, and then Jane called me, not even, I was there maybe 18 months, and Jane called me and said, Linda, I have a job that you're going to have to take. And that was the director of development position at Volunteers of America, where I stayed for almost 14 years. And I was the director of development. I was the chief development officer. And that's where I learned communications.
Yeah.
So I was also the chief development and communications officer, became acting CEO. My CEO, I learned so much from, Richard Salyer, unfortunately passed away from colon cancer at a pretty young age. The board was not really aware of how ill he was. We knew. He called me on a Friday and said, Linda, you're going to have to be ready to take over. Things aren't going very well here. Not anticipating I was going to get a call Friday night from his wife that he had passed away.
Wow.
So, and that was $100 million organization. So very big job with government contracts. So there was a lot to do. We had to ensure the government contractors, with the agencies, that we were going to be stable and we could fulfill our mission. There were over 1,000 employees.
Wow.
So it was, but I learned, I can't tell you how much I learned, from budgeting to audits to finances, board management, events. Dude, I was the person who put the sidewalk Santas on the street.
Okay.
Most people think that was the Salvation Army, but it never was the Salvation Army. It was always Volunteers of America.
Really?
Mhm.
Okay. I didn't know that.
So managing sidewalk Santas who were men from our shelters.
Really?
That was really interesting as well.
Wow. There's a lot of stories there. I want to probably go back to the Santa's thing, but I want to ask you, when you took over as CEO for that's Volunteers of America, right? Was that an interim role for you, or were you going to were you the heir apparent for that position?
There's probably many answers to that question. There's always a lot of politics involved, especially when you've got a lot of staff who were more senior than me. They were older than me. So Richard asked me to do that over the chief program officer, over the CFO. I was a fairly young woman at the time.
Yeah.
So, and the fact that I had to call the board chair and say, well, Richard is not only gone, but he's asked me to be CEO. It was a lot.
Sure.
So, it was an interim role. The board eventually hired someone from the outside, who then came in, and I went back to my role as chief development and communications officer, and then departed about maybe 2 years after that.
Is that so? Once you sort of got that opportunity at that, at the executive, well, you were always C level, but to be the CEO, that opportunity was it. I want to say how I talk when I'm trying to be very professional with you, but did you really dig it? And it was that like, oh, this is where I need to be. I want to be at that, running the organization from the very important top officer role.
Yes, and I had a lot of support from the staff. So the staff really liked me in that role. And there were a lot of very senior staff, because we had division directors who were very senior people that ran what in effect were small nonprofits themselves. So if you figure there were 5 divisions, $100 million operation, these divisions were quite large, had a lot of employees. They were very complex.
They were running their own business unit inside of this larger entity.
Correct.
Right.
And yeah, so there was so much I learned there. If I'm creating a culture for the organization, how do you create a corporate culture when you have staff all the way from dishwashers to direct service providers to, mid-level managers. How do you develop a culture where everybody walks the talk, talks the walk, and leads by example and uses the same language? And when you see that, when you teach that, and you have a culture of professionalism and accountability, you really see it in the staff. And that is been really important to me as I then moved from Volunteers of America to my other roles. How do you create that culture
Mm.
of positivity and accountability?
Yeah, I think it's got to be even eh, certainly culture we know is important, right? And it's got to be interesting as a leader coming from the outside, so to speak, when there already is a culture, right? We all, when we join an organization, wherever we join in an organization, we want to make our presence known, and we want to put our stamp, our stamp on the organization. However, it's different to navigate that when you're the new person inside of something that's already been going on and has maybe dozens or hundreds of years of culture and history, right?
It can be very sticky. For sure, my transition into Coleman was a good example of how do you come in from the outside when the staff were anticipating someone from the inside would take the role. And then how do you come inside when you have your own management style and ideas of the way things should work? How do you start changing that culture? And oftentimes what happens is people start leaving.
Yeah.
So if people don't want to be on your bus, they often find their way off the bus all by themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, which I listen, that's part of business, right? We know nonprofits are businesses. Everybody, if you've never tuned into this show before, nonprofits are businesses with a different tax status, gang.
Yep.
These are businesses who, as you just said, you have people from the C-suite down to the front lines and kitchens and dishwashers and folks like that. I mean, these are businesses who make payroll and have employee benefits, right? And have to deal with workers' compensation issues and all the things that a business has to deal with. And sometimes I think people forget that. And there's, as we're here today on the 27th of September, 2024, there's some challenges going on here on Long Island as it relates to Suffolk County and Suffolk County, several, two specifically, Suffolk County legislators on how they believe that nonprofit organizations should be run, talking about executive compensation. And if executive compensation is more than $250,000, then anyone in the organization earns more than that, then the funding is in jeopardy. So there's a lot of things going on where I find most people don't realize what these organizations are. Some of these organizations are 40, 50, 60, $100 million organizations. These are large businesses, right? So I get off track for a second here, but it's just critically important for us to continue to realize that, it's a tax filing status. It doesn't, these are businesses, right? Do you find at your level and the level of the size of organizations that you are involved with and lead that you've had to continually tell people and educate some folks on that type of stuff?
Yeah, I don't necessarily use those words specifically, but I do think that by my leadership style, my focus on professionalism, accountability, revenue, expense,
Mhm.
like a business, you
Yeah.
need more revenue than you have expenses. And then, as opposed to talking about it as a business, that's more the way I talk about it. But I mean, sometimes you see the way nonprofits evolve, they want to be nice.
Right.
So oftentimes what you see is organizations they kind of grow around the people as opposed to the mission. So let's say they hire somebody as a marketing person, but as a matter of fact, that marketing person has no uh, social media skill. So they hire a social media person.
Mhm.
And then they kind of so they grow a skill set around people as opposed to the needs of the organization.
Mm.
And you can see that when you look at it, when you look at the roster and you say, A, why are there so many people here?
Right.
What is it that everybody is doing? And then one of the number one things I do is I start trimming people
Yeah.
back. Again,
Yeah.
either by attrition, they leave on their own, or sometimes obviously you have to ask people to leave.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's right sizing an organization, right? Which is come to be this negative connotation around that, but right sizing meaning just having, we got to get the most value out of each of these seats, right? That's an important part of a business.
Based on the needs of the organization. What does the organization need to be successful? What does the organization need to fulfill its mission? What does the organization need to grow?
Yeah, I wanna we're gonna go to break in a second, and I wanna go when we come back. I really want to go into when you took on the role at as CEO at Susan G. Komen, and hear about that. And as we do, I'd like to weave in this whole thing because of your background in fundraising and development, and being at the top of the organizations that you where you were and where you are now. I want to maybe we could talk a little bit about how development is always like a theme that might run through some of the work you do, and the culture of your organizations, right? So I want to come back to that as development and fundraising, because I think we can have some fun with that. So let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about your role as CEO of Susan G. Komen, and then we'll get into your role at Lustgarten Foundation. Okay.
Right.
All right. We'll go to a quick break. Tommy D and Linda in the attic.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Brancu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
If you don't have your health, what do you really have? It's time to feel good in your body and shift from struggle to ease. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul, where we explore the sacred wisdom of your body while you sit back, relax, and go on a journey of self-discovery. Join me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to awaken your heart, transform your well-being, and unlock a deeper understanding of yourself.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
We are back to the show. I get a chuckle out of that song. Even after 187, 188 episodes, I still laugh about it. In fact, one of my children re-recorded or just recorded my voicemail on my cell phone and was like singing that song, and I just left it there. Like, I'm calling all these professional people who call me back, and it's nobody's like saying anything negative. They're like, that is the coolest thing. That's so cute. Leave that on there. Like, big bosses and stuff like that. So I'm like, you know what? It's going to stay on there. But that is the song. Yep, it is. We are in the attic, or I'm in the attic. Linda is not in the attic. But we say we're in the attic when we do the show. All right. So let's get into this. Linda, you have this background certainly in development, and then in leadership. And then, it's, as you get to, let's talk about the Susan G. Komen. When you got there, why did that happen? What was what brought that to your attention? Or I'm sure somebody reached out to you and said, we'd love to have you on the team here. Tell us about that story.
So that was a headhunter who reached out. The executive director or CEO who was there was departing. And at that time, your listeners probably don't remember this, but Susan G. Komen, at one time, there was quite a I don't want to call it a scandal, but there was quite a public relations disaster when the national office made a decision that was misinterpreted. It was interpreted as defunding Planned Parenthood. And there was an uproar, across the country. Susan G. Komen was a huge nationwide network of affiliates in almost all 50 states, sometimes multiple affiliates in states that raised most of the revenue from the race for the cure. And we depended on the community for fundraising, and the community backed away significantly. We lost board members. So I came in at that time and had to deal with a staff who was completely demoralized by that, and then a bit undermined by the departure of the previous CEO. So I had to come in to address the public relations issue, build up a staff who was demoralized, who wasn't thrilled with the fact that I was there. So how do you go about doing that? And it was a slow, I often say, evolution, not revolution. You come in, you take your time, you have to assess and then see where people land. And some people left eventually. And then I ended up moving the organization because we were occupying this very elegant suite of offices that were too expensive. So we had to sublet. And Komen, when I got there, was really like the pink ribbon on the hill that no one liked very much.
Really?
Yes. And then by the time I left, we really were the pink ribbon connecting the breast cancer community. And we built up, I used social media, my entire staff used social media. That was when Facebook was Facebook. And not Meta, and not like it is today. And you really could build relationships on Facebook. And so we reached out to the people who did our race for the cure, and I'm still friends with many of them.
It sounds like it was like almost like grassroots. You're not saying that, but I'm like, it sounds like you had to like reestablish these relationships and get people to buy in again, right?
It's funny, the difference between the national office, which was this behemoth, and the affiliates, which were very, very much grassroots. It was completely different. But we still had to operate the same way. We had to raise our money every year. We were a grant-making organization. We gave grants to other community-based breast cancer organizations that provided free screenings, that provided rides, all sorts of different things. So we had to raise our money, and it was the race for the cure. We had to build those relationships. I rebuilt the board of directors, and that was also a very slow process that takes time. And but during COVID, the national office decided that they were going to really fold all of the affiliates into the national office. So that was at the time that I then went to Lustgarten. But I loved my work at Susan G. Komen. I loved the community. I loved my team. We really had a great working environment, and it was a lot of fun.
So I love that, that you look back on it and it was great. And we realized something. I wrote down evolution, not revolution. I just want to underscore that, from a general perspective, everybody, we're not always going to stay at these companies or these entities forever. We continue to move on. I know you didn't say that specifically about moving on, but I think generally as humans, like things are going to change. We're going to move on. Times we leave organizations, things ebb and flow. What was it for you? Did you have an awareness already about Lustgarten Foundation, as from your work with your past organization, just being in the cancer space, or how does that happen?
So I was aware of Lustgarten because when Lustgarten was founded by the founders of Cablevision. And so, as I'm sure you know from living on Long Island, that Cablevision used to run extensive numbers of public service announcements. I happen to live in New Jersey, but am a Cablevision customer. Sure. So I was, and I lived in New York City before moving to New Jersey. So I was very much aware of the Lustgarten Foundation, just the name. And that was really about it. The breast cancer space is a little bit insular compared to, and it doesn't really work that much with other cancer organizations besides breast cancer and maybe like the American Cancer Society, that kind of thing.
Again, yes, I hear what you're saying. And also, we have 24 hours in our day. Doesn't mean we're out there getting to know and connect with everybody else, right? I grasp that too. And so the Cablevision leadership certainly responded, I guess is a better way to say it, when one of their own came down with pancreatic cancer, and they went into action and created this organization. So yes, certainly aware of it out here on Long Island. But like there's like 9,000 nonprofits on Long Island. There's 37,000 nonprofits in the 5 boroughs of New York City. And as the guy who calls himself the nonprofit sector connector, I try to meet and connect with as many as I can. But the funny thing is, there's so many. And what the thing is, I hear so many times is, we're like the best kept secret, Tommy D, and we don't want to be the best kept secret. And I go, I know. And that's what kind of inspires me every day to just get out there and meet more people and tell more stories, because I say this, and I've been saying this for years, like, if it wasn't for the organizations that do this work, whether they be funding organizations, whether they be programmatic organizations, the work doesn't get done. I really truly believe that. Like, if there are not these nonprofit organizations doing the work on the front lines, or funding the work that's being done, or the research, as it relates to your organization, it doesn't get done. I'm sorry, and this is not a knock on the government, but I wouldn't want the government running a lot of the programs that maybe it is a knock on the government. So that's kind of where I fall on as that is. You get to the organization. We're going to take a break in a minute, but when you get to the organization, some of the things that like were eye openers for you, and some of it, maybe the storylines of how you saw your vision of what you were going to do here
At Lustgarten.
Yes.
Yeah, it was also similar to what I found at Coleman. It's just that we need to think about the mission of the organization, which is the research, which is what we fund. We needed to build a research department and reorient staff to our main goal, which is fundraising, as you mentioned before. And you've met Stephanie, and Stephanie is a terrific fundraiser. She is persistent and relentless.
Yeah,
which is what you need in a fundraiser.
We certainly do. Yeah, not for the faint of heart, so to speak, right? Being on the front lines. But
Not
again,
when you're asking for millions. Nope.
it's a lot of dough, man. We're asking real money, right?
Yeah.
So I want to go into we're going to take a break. When we come back, I want to go into this conversation. We're going to get into development. Like, I really want to hear your feelings on it, from like, the fundies, the fundamentals, the basics and stuff like that, and how it relates to, capital campaigns, to major donors, to asking for millions of dollars like you're talking about. And I also want to talk about what it is the organization does, because it is funding, but it's funding research. So I want to hear about some of the wins and the success stories and things like that as it relates to the organization. And as I probably told you when we spoke earlier this week, this show is about you. It's about the organization. So anything you need to tell me and you need to let the audience know about, I want to make sure we get into that as well too.
We're going to need all day.
Well, listen, the show goes for an hour. And the thing about my show is you can always come back. I'm going to do 5,000 episodes. So after that, we'll see. But that's the first goal, is 5,000. We'll hit 200, and I guess in about 15 weeks. So, all right, let's take a quick break, and Linda and I will be back. Thank you. Hey, everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Were you an essential worker during the pandemic? If you needed to learn stages of epilepsy, did you depend on advocates? Did you use new innovations to cope with mental and neurological issues? Maintaining high quality of life and keeping good mental health are what we all strive for. I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each week top healthcare influencers, professionals, and innovators answer these questions and more. Stay tuned on Thursdays at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will continue to be frank about health with all of you.
If you don't have your health, what do you really have? It's time to feel good in your body and shift from struggle to ease. Hi, I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul, where we explore the sacred wisdom of your body while you sit back, relax, and go on a journey of self-discovery. Join me every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to awaken your heart, transform your well-being, and unlock a deeper understanding of yourself.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
All right, we're back. Cut through the static. So, 1998, 51-year-old Mark Lustgarten, Cablevision vice chairman, was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. The organization supported him. Cablevision chairman Charles F. Dolan and CEO James Dolan supported Mark and his vision for cancer research, specifically pancreatic cancer research. And before Mark passed from the disease, this is right off the website, everybody, lustgarten.org. Before he passed from the disease, this organization was already in motion, right? This was already going. There was a mission. There was a focus on this. Maybe we could pick it up from there, Linda, and then let's lean into some of the work the organization's doing, please.
Sure. So when Mark was diagnosed, there were very few options for him. And Mark and the Dolans could not believe that their beloved executive had so few options. And even though they had the resources to fly to Johns Hopkins and do whatever needed to be done. And he actually did pretty well. I think he lived about 18 months. It was long enough for my now chairman, Andy Lustgarten, to graduate from college. So Mark was able to see him graduate from college, but he was very young. And when they founded the organization, they couldn't believe that there was so little work being done in the field. And there was very little government money from the NCI or from the Department of Defense going to pancreatic cancer, mostly because there was no one doing the work. So it was the Lustgarten Foundation who had to build the field.
When you say no one doing the work, you mean there was no one doing the research, and is that just simply there was no one funding the research? So who's going to go do the research and not be funded? Is it kind of like?
No, it was actually the opposite. It was actually the people needed to be in the field and then needed to apply to do the work.
Okay.
But pancreatic cancer is so difficult that people who were thinking about it, I've heard it said that people were told that pancreatic cancer is where careers go to die.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So it really took people like Dave Tuvison, who's our chief scientist now, who's at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory on Long Island, Elizabeth Jaffe, who's a world famous immunotherapy expert. She's at Johns Hopkins, and they were the ones that said, I want to tackle this. And then other people then also started to come into the field. And so the Lustgarten Foundation had this idea of how do we really advance this work? And one of those ideas, which is really astonishing, is we are going to fund dedicated labs at different institutions across the country. So now we have 6 dedicated labs across the country, and that's a bit of a different mindset where it's basically unrestricted dollars. It's $1 million a year to these labs, unrestricted dollars. So these labs can think about what is it that we do to be innovative, to be radical, to think differently, because that's what pancreatic cancer, because of the nature of the disease, and we could spend all day talking about the disease itself.
Yeah.
The nature of the disease, because it's so hard to diagnose. Most people are diagnosed too late. There's a stroma around the tumor that makes it difficult for the chemotherapy to get in there. It tends to metastasize very quickly. And so we know it's a difficult disease, and we know we need new therapies, better therapies, early detection. And that's what the Lustgarten Foundation has done and is doing. And the work is really exciting now. And the board has been very patient, and I don't know how most organizations would do this when they spent basically 25 years funding basic science. with not a lot of translational work, because it took us 25 years to better understand the biology of the disease. It was the Lustgarten Foundation that funded Bert Vogelstein in order to do the genomic typing of pancreatic cancer, because we didn't have that had never been done. It had never been mapped before. So now that we've funded all this basic science, we now have 13 small clinical trials that are getting, so we are getting the science into patients. And that's the whole idea, is how do we get the science into patients? And obviously there are many now clinical trials at all of the major academic centers, but we are focusing on these small trials that are very deep into the science, so we really understand how the therapies mechanistically are working in patients. And we're getting to the point where more and more patients will have their tumor biopsied, and then we take the biopsy and we really do a deep dive into does the patient have what are the mutations present, and that might be targetable for the patient.
In listening to this, it's so exciting because, being that I get to spend time with nonprofit leaders all the time, there's so much nuance and so many different things. Like, I call myself the nonprofit sector connector, right? But like, the sector is made up of so many different disciplines and so many different interests and different programs and all these things. And I wonder, from your perspective, I take it you don't have a scientific background or a medical background and things like that. So that must fire you up to learn about all these different things every day, and as much as you can be aware of, you're running the organization, right? So how much do you get to engage with the scientists and the folks who are doing this work?
So quite a bit. So there is a weekly meeting which I attend. There's scientific advisory board meetings which I attend. So understanding the research and being able to translate for patients when we speak to patients, translate to donors when we speak to donors. So it is important, though I'm not a scientist, that I do have some basic fluidity with the vocabulary and with the understanding of the science. And I attended many breast cancer conferences and was very knowledgeable about breast cancer. And that doesn't translate all that much, but some of the fundamentals do.
Sure. Yeah. Again, we talk about, the tenacity of being in development, and when you're telling this story, it's a little different than saying, not that one is necessarily more important than the other, but when we're saying, well, we help people who are food insecure. Well, that's something more basic from everybody to sort of understand. These are individuals who are hungry, don't have access to food. We get them access to food. Sometimes, or in a lot of cases, like in your organization, it could be more technical and there's more to explain. That's kind of where I was going with that.
And a lot of our donors lost someone to pancreatic cancer, almost all. So they really actually want to understand the science, and they want to understand how their dollar can impact the science, because they want someday that other families don't have to experience what they experienced. So they are very passionate about funding the research. And a lot of donors want to give to Lustgarten since our dollars are invested only into research.
Yeah. Have been being personally touched by this disease, and certainly in community here being touched by it. It's I feel the same way. You want to learn more, especially as it relates to you know other family members and things like that, and it's something certainly to be aware of. And I want to understand, if let's go back to this point that I brought up a couple of times. At at the beginning stages of what you did back from JC Geaver, right? Did I say it right? JC Geaver, right? That's where you started out in this fundraising space. So how have you maybe seen development and fundraising evolve from, you kind of said like the 80s, but you kind of said it like quietly, but like I mean, let's be real. We all are older than we were yesterday, right? So it's that evolution and experience. I wonder if you can speak to just development as you saw it before and as it related? I mean, you mentioned when you're talking about one of the organizations, you mentioned Facebook, and you were kind of rebuilding those relationships and things. Even that's evolved. So how do you see what you saw in development in the past and now as you're informed from it today?
So we're able now to work more efficiently, obviously, and more effectively and more targeted. So, and I, throughout my career, have very much focused on what are we doing with our foundations and corporations. Foundations, particularly because it's a different beast. And so when I got to the Lustgarten Foundation, a lot of the even family foundations were in the direct mail. So pulled all of those out of the direct mail. And because life was always at 360 degrees, Jane Geaver now works with me on our foundation fundraising and on our major gift program. Because foundations they need a proposal, they need follow-up, and you need to just do the work.
There's nurturing that has to go on, right?
Cultivation. Yes. So that's been very effective, as is we've redone our databases, we've invested in software. Actually, Stephanie and Kerry are now really excited about a product called Grativid that sends out targeted videos to donors, and we can record our VP of research talking about a specific project, and they can send that out very efficiently and effectively. So it really is knowing the tools that are out there, being able to hire the staff. You know, I have a senior VP of business technology and intelligence. I have a director of data services. We have people. So you need that the level of talent to run a complex fundraising environment.
Yeah. I love that. Data is key, but if I have all this data and I don't know what it is and what to do with it, it's not very helpful, right? It could be more distracting, right?
And most organizations, especially those who used Razor's Edge for years and misused Razor's Edge for years, the data is pretty dirty.
Yeah. And again, we know there's probably money in there somewhere, but we got to figure out where it is. And now it's, if it's dirty data, as you said, I like that. I'm going to take that one. I'll give you credit. My sister tells me I got to give credit twice and then I can keep it. So if you have dirty data, then, you can't really, it's not useful. And that's interesting. We could talk for days about that, because I think maybe you come on a panel that we could do maybe through the nonprofit resource hub, you and maybe some of your team as it relates to it running, how to kind of utilize what's there. There's always software out there, but what's best of breed and what's really most effective and things like that. And whereas an organization like yours, has different needs than maybe a smaller organization. And there's so much, I guess it probably gets distracting for people as they look at their opportunities and solutions in front of them. So we can talk about that another time. We're going to take a quick break. We come back. I really want to talk about, I like to kind of close the show in this last segment, Linda, with what's upcoming for the organization. I know it, when I'm on the website, it says find a walk. Maybe you could talk about some upcoming research and things like that we want to highlight, and certainly events and things where people can plug into. Maybe there's some connections. I noticed I was looking through there was a PowerPoint deck. I think it was like an annual report I was looking at this morning, and I saw, Northwell Cancer Institute was very involved with some of the work you're doing. So, maybe it's just shouting out some of the folks that you've connected with and things like that, and some of the folks that you're ambitious to connect with that we might be able to make some relationship. How's that sound?
Great.
All right, we'll be right back.
Are you a high-achieving, growth-oriented leader? Are you interested in developing your authentic leadership while creating a healthy, inclusive workplace? Hi, I'm Dr. Mira Broncu, host of The Hard Skills on talkradio.nyc at 5 p.m. Eastern on Tuesdays, where we discuss how leaders develop the hard skills needed to make a greater impact. We interview experts, have live coaching, and tackle these challenges. Listen to The Hard Skills on Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy and Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good directions. So cut through all the static. Join Tommy in his attic.
We're back, and I'm reading something that says, progress is paramount. We drive bold, innovative research with a singular mission, transforming pancreatic cancer into a curable disease. That's the mission. That's what this organization is all about, Linda. Let's talk a little bit about, maybe you could tell me some of the breakthroughs, some connections maybe that you're working with strategically, and or maybe there's connections you're looking to work with strategically.
Sure. So, if we can go back to two things though. So you mentioned the progress is paramount. So one of the things that I did when I got to the Lustgarten Foundation was really look at our external communications and revamped all of our external communications, including some of those points. So it's what's changing our kind of mission statement to transforming pancreatic cancer into a curable disease. What are our message pillars? You picked up on one, progress is paramount. Another one is community is power. So that was one of my big focuses. We've also recently changed the logo. That's a new website. So when you come into a new position, it's really important that you look at these things to see, are we presenting ourselves in the best manner possible? And then back to your other questions. So all your listeners out there need to know the number one thing about pancreatic cancer. If you are diagnosed, you must be treated at a high volume, multidisciplinary care facility that does academic research. And Northwell Health, one of our big partners, is one of those. They have purposefully built a world-class pancreas center right on Long Island. They recruited experts from Johns Hopkins like Matt Weiss and other physicians, Danielle D. Peralta, who's also a surgical oncologist. Because if you're diagnosed, you need your surgical oncologist, you need your medical oncologist, your radiation oncologist, you need a nurse navigator, you need a nutritionist. All of that needs to provide wraparound care, and that is what Northwell does. And they also then partner with Cold Spring Harbor. So we look at this as a cornerstone of care, Lustgarten Foundation, Northwell Health, and Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories, in order to make sure that the research at Cold Spring is getting into patients at Northwell. And then, so for example, Dan King, who's at Northwell, is a medical oncologist. He is one day in the lab with Dave Tubeson. And there's another physician from Northwell, who's a surgical oncologist, who's at our organoid facility. So an organoid is an avatar of a patient's tumor, where they use that avatar to test therapies against. That's a very simplistic way of putting it, but you get the general idea.
I get it, and it sounds like super cool and super fun. I mean, I was not a kid who really was into science, but these stories you're telling, like, that sounds incredibly compelling to watch what's going on there.
So it's very important that your listeners know that they can get world-class care right on Long Island. And obviously there's other facilities. Memorial Sloan Kettering has satellite facilities on Long Island, so you have to be treated at one of those high volume multidisciplinary care centers, because the patients need hope, but they need to know that they're getting the best treatment for their cancer.
Yeah, and it sound again, it's I don't know, this is the word that's coming up for me, but like cutting edge. Like this is happening. You're saying like, the doctors, this team of oncologists are supporting the patient and doing the research. They're like like you said, the gentleman you mentioned is in the lab one day a week doing the work. Like that's in it, man, right? That's who you want.
Yes, it's really important, and yes, and then of course early detection is really a primary focus of the foundation. We launched about maybe 15 months ago a $30 million campaign to fund early detection initiatives. And we've been funding quite a number of projects at Johns Hopkins, and we're going to be partnering with other organizations. That's also a big focus of the foundation. How can we leverage donor dollars further? You can leverage donor dollars further by bringing in collaborators that can match or even double match your dollars in order to push the work further. So we'll be partnering with a number of organizations with our early detection program. How can we bring in the best minds, new thoughts? There's so many brilliant people out there. Maybe they're not working in pancreas cancer now. Maybe they're biostatisticians. Maybe they're AI experts. And how can they use their expertise in the pancreas space to push us forward so we can find patients stage 1, stage 2, when we know that they do better.
Yeah. I want to ask you something without mentioning any names, but is there a way you could talk about that collaborative piece, specifically as it relates to doubling funding? So if you had like doubling donor dollars, can you like technically explain what that means for folks who lead and run organizations that might not be clear on those collaborations?
So, for example, we worked with Stand Up to Cancer for many, many years. And they gave $1, we gave $3. So we actually were their collaboration partner and were able to enhance their donor dollars. But you find with these collaborations, you're working with more people, bringing in people maybe who weren't working in pancreas cancer. And so that was a hugely effective partnership that has really pushed the boundaries of pancreas cancer a lot further than where we had been when we started. We funded an organization called Breakthrough Cancer, which is run by Tyler Jacks up at MIT. We gave them $5 million because they were assembling collaborators from academic pancreas centers across the country. So we felt that our money, our $5 million, would be basically, I think, tripled with Breakthrough Cancer. And then when we do our other collaboration, when we're working with another foundation, it'll probably be 50-50. So if we have $5 million, they have $5 million. So then there's $10 million. So it's not, and an executive director out there will say, well, I want that money to hit my balance sheet. And that's not always the case, obviously, that it's going to hit your balance sheet, but you are pushing the research forward because you've got 2 people investing in a project rather than just one.
Yeah, and what I'm also hearing you say is obviously the money is important, but it's also because of these collaborations, now these minds, that mastermind of these different people who may not have been, even like you said, may not have even been in this pancreas world. They weren't even thinking about it, and then now they are. That's obviously a boon, but it's also, I think, meeting people that may not have even met who might be doing similar work, right? So there's probably some of that because, not to sound negative, but we can as humans get in our silos, and as an organization get in our silos, and maybe there's not enough of that. What do you think about that?
I think we have to that, and also egos. We have to put our egos aside and do what's best for the mission and for the patients or people we serve. And oftentimes that is can be effectuated through collaboration. No single organization has every single idea or the best ideas, but working together, you certainly can get there faster. And that is what we want, whether we're feeding people, whether we're educating kids, or whether we're looking to transform pancreatic cancer into a curable disease. We'll do it bigger, better, bolder with collaboration or through collaboration.
100%, and it's so cool. This has been great. This is like it's a little bit different than me being zany on the show, like it often happens, but I like this. I'm learning so much from you today, and I think that we all continue to evolve as you talk about. And my own in the last 45, 50 minutes, I'm evolving and thinking of things differently, just about as it relates to nonprofits, but as it relates to the work I'm doing in the world, because I want to learn more about what you were doing. So this is super exciting. Let's just roll in. We only got a minute left. Talk about the walks, because I know that's a big part of the organization. When are they? Like, I know we can go to the website, but is there specific things you want to call out on upcoming events?
Our Long Island Walk is October 6th, Jones Beach, Field 5. The Walk Village opens at 8:30. We start our program at 9:30. We partner with CBS 2 on our New York City and Long Island Walk. So that's a great partnership. They provide a lot of PSA services for us, as well as talent at the walks. The walks are one of our primary fundraising vehicles, but most importantly, it's about the community. How do we enrich the community, support the community? People who have lost someone, how can we support them? And by seeing survivors at the walks, we know that we're pushing the research further, and so that there are more survivors. There's a walk in Boston on Columbus Day weekend. People should go to our website. But for those people in Long Island, please come out to the walks. One of the best things you can do in terms of field research, go to other people's events, see how they do things, see what you can learn. And you can learn more about the Lustgarten community, the work that we do, meet our great staff, meet some of our great scientists at the walk on October 6th, Jones Beach, Field 5.
I love it. So I love that call out too to your peers, saying, hey, you know what, you want to learn how things can go, and come and watch, come and see, come and learn from us. I love that. It's a great invitation. I'll make sure I'm there that morning. If you need me to do stuff, if you need me to dance, you need me to dress in purple clothes, I'll do whatever you want me to do. Maybe I'll wear that purple suit. Although
Good idea.
I wore the purple suit with flip-flops last night. And if we were going to be at Jones Beach, I could probably still pull that off. This is a whole story. We're just getting warmed up, Linda. Wait till we hang out. So listen, Linda Tantawi has been my guest. The organization is Lustgarten Foundation, and they are working to make pancreatic cancer a curable disease. And I'm just jazzed to have you. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for being here. And everybody, make it a great weekend. And I'll see you next Friday morning right here in my attic. Philanthropy and Focus. Later.
Nonprofits need connections to move in good direction.